So this course, as you've heard from Sultan, is that we want to explain how to apply the handbook. And this, let's say, the title for this course and also the motivation for this course came from the winter school, where I wasn't there personally, but we heard from a number of people who were there that it's all very well to have the handbook, but reading it is not enough. And there are many questions people are still asking themselves afterwards is how to actually apply it. And so what I'll do in this course here is I'm going to apply it also to, I'm also the coordinator for the Panos node. So I'm applying it to show you how we applied it. And also from, as one of the editors, explaining what was in there and what was the meaning of what we actually put in there. And hopefully at the end of this course, you will have a better understanding of how to use it in your own case, or in another case if you are listening in and you're thinking of using this in the future. Just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So this is based on version 2 of the handbook. There was a version 1. And if you go to Zenodo, where we keep the official draft that you can download, make sure that you are clicking on the version 2 and that on your front cover you have version 2.0. If you look for this with a search machine, you might end up going to version 1 first of all. So make sure that you don't have the wrong version. You will find things did actually evolve quite a lot. You've heard about the 6 modules. I will go through them individually. Just a word about the fact that in the beginning we were going to have a slightly different format. We've now split this course into 2. We have 3 sessions. And what we're going to do in this session is I will present all the 6 modules and we'll go through your questions afterwards. We won't do any questions in between. But in the second session, so second and third session, so these are, I think, on the 15th and 22nd of June, what we propose is online coaching. So these will be also 1.5 hour to 2 hour sessions. And we will go through each of these exercises, which will be an exercise per module, and then there will be breakout rooms, and we'll discuss with you how to do this. So if you want to deepen your understanding or actually go into practicing what you've learned today, I encourage you to join us for sessions 2 or 3, because 2 and 3 are going to be in the same format. And even better is if you come with a few of your friends who are working in the same node, so that you can discuss how to address these questions together. So that explains the reason for having 3 sessions. Module 1, Introduction to the EOS Federation Handbook. So it's like I see the EOS Federation is a bit like a puzzle, and this is one of the key pieces in this puzzle. It was motivated actually in the beginning of 2 years ago, if I remember correctly, by the Elixir Operation Handbook. They have a handbook which is used to guide how they work inside their own consortium. And so we came up with this idea, I think it was, well, inside the association, is to have a handbook which would be a reference document where we could go to and find, if not all the information, something which, the place where you can then go and find the official information. So the links to the official documents, so that there'd be one single reference document which links out to everything else. It was supposed to be short, 50 pages. Not longer than that. Some people find that still too long. At least it's shorter than the 3.0, which, if I recall, is the first version, or the current version is 200 pages. And the idea is to capture the common understanding, because they're different. Of course, something that's not well documented, you can have different understandings of it. And the idea is also to come up with a common understanding based on the people who are building it as well. And we wanted to make sure that it's built by the community or written by the community, and that it's also approved and made official by the tripartite group. I will explain more about that. We're in the second version already, and we could, there will be the sort of rough timescale is to have a new version every year while things are still moving fast. Yeah. So I know people could still be confused about the Federation. At least sometimes I am. The questions which are not answered, and this is because there's still many decisions to be taken. But having been involved in the handbook from the beginning, I think we can say, and I hope at the end you will agree, that the basic concept is clear. There is enough information in version 2 of the handbook to build a node with the current understanding. This doesn't mean that things won't evolve. They will evolve as well. And that additional confusion might come from the fact that people are not reading the handbook, let's say, carefully enough, because we've tried our best to make it as clear as possible, and also maybe not agreeing with it. So you could have different opinions, which is okay, that's fine. But I think you have to see the handbook as something that's coherent in itself. Then if you have a different view on things, that's, of course, your own, that's your choice, yeah. This picture and this slide is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I think today with the massive adoption of AI and also the way people seem to have a problem with attention span and so on, I think this is again a case where you have to take the book and read it from the beginning to the end and not read a summary of it. Take your time reading it. I've read it again recently, and it takes about 45 minutes to read. And think about it a bit. So these are, I mean, I think you're all grown-ups and know how to do that, but sometimes it's useful just to remind ourselves in this time and age that taking time for things does actually help. Who wrote the handbook? So there were two phases. The first version was produced and was released in March 2025, but was written in 2024. And I was pleased to see some of the volunteers that are on this picture are also in this meeting. So maybe they will also recognize some of the stuff that they wrote. The second version, which was written last year, was based on, there were two, let's say, inputs to it. So we prepared a survey, which was sent to the first wave nodes, the EOSC, intra-EOS projects, the task forces, as well as the opportunity area groups, and asked them to reply to the survey. We got a good response to that. And we then also asked the first wave nodes to propose volunteers to help updating the handbook. So the idea was to update the handbook based on the experience of the first wave nodes during 2025. And this is the version that you have now, where I see we've had already 7,000 downloads. Okay. I don't know if that means, if that translates to 7,000 reads, but yeah, we'll see. Who is it for? So the handbook is primarily for organizations that want to make their resources available via the EOS Federation. And to do that, as you'll see during the rest of the talk, you would propose to build a node and make your resources available through the node, or make them available through a different node, someone else's node, that's called onboarding resources. Because it's for people who are building nodes, it's not aimed at end users, so the research community. It's aimed at the users, so it's aimed at facility managers, policymakers, because it will incur certain cost for people building it, and also providers of scientific services and data. So just to make clear that if you're here and you are, I hope you fall into one of these categories. Otherwise, imagine you were in one of these categories. An important thing when you're deciding to make your resources available through a node is you should ask yourself what node you're going to build. And there are three types of nodes that have actually been identified. So the first type, which is the one that is closest to my heart, are the thematic nodes. These are the nodes that are offering scientific resources. So on this slide, you have the list of first wave nodes. And we had 5 thematic nodes offering different data and services in different scientific areas. Then you have national nodes, which are, let's say, collecting or offering a common interface to national resources. And then finally, you have the infrastructure nodes. So the EU node and EU DAT. These were all part of the first wave. In the second wave, we got some more nodes as well. So the second wave was decided or agreed upon in May this year. We got 3 more thematic nodes and a large number of national nodes, and also some more infrastructure nodes. So today, these are the nodes that are officially, let's say, agreed by the tripartite as the ones who will be the first wave, or now we can say the first group of nodes that are going to be identified as the EOSC Federation. So if I go into an example already, I think it's important to see why would you want to build a node. So in our case, where we are what's called the photon and neutron community, is we are more than 18 large research infrastructures in Europe. We've been working together for over 20 years. We produce huge quantities of data, so petabytes today, probably exabytes tomorrow. And some of the data has had a huge impact already. So if you look at the example of protein crystallography, some of you might have heard of AlphaFold. 80% of the data in the protein data bank come from synchrotrons, not only in Europe, of course, but also worldwide. But we have lots of data that is equally, could have also a very large impact, but is not fair yet. And building the node, so we've been working on this over the years, but the EOSC Federation and EOSC in general gives us this motivation to continue and boost the effort around that. So if we look at how we've been built here, so this is our official logo, which was given to us by the EOSC, by the tripartite. We are 11 research organizations, research performing organizations, and we have one of them, which is the ESRF, who represents the whole node as it stands. So this gives you an idea that you don't have to be only a single, you don't have to be a single organization. There can be multiple organizations that are working together to form a node. And we have a vision statement, of course. Our vision statement is to put in place a system in Europe to find and access data and services from European photon and neutron facilities for research and innovation, and to help researchers store, share, process, analyze, and reuse fair research outputs. And the whole reason we're doing this is to increase the impact of what we're doing. And this, what we are building, is now what we're calling the Panos node. So for us, the two things come really together. What we want to do anyway, but let's say without this vision and without the movement towards the EOSC Federation, it wouldn't have been so easy. It's not saying building a node is easy, but let's say it was facilitated. If we look at a vision statement from CERN, for instance, this is from the project charter. CERN adopted a slightly different approach. They said, first of all, they would make the services that they want to put in the node available via the EU node. So these were Zenodo, Rihanna, Indico, and Data. And the second phase, which they're now busy carrying out, is they will establish a node to provide access to high energy physics data. And this data they want to make as discoverable and reusable as possible, but they also want to provide tools for people who are not from the high energy physics community to run analysis. So I see a strong similarity between what CERN is offering and what we were also doing. So you get an idea that the thematic nodes, there's a strong overlap. Here's another one. The last statement I wanted to show you was from the German node. So Germany is building a node called, which is managed by the Nationale Forschungsdateninfrastruktur, which is NFDI. And they want to provide data as well, but they also want to work a lot on interoperability and lower the barrier, so of how you can access different resources. One thing you should be aware of as well is that you can actually have different, you can have the same service or the same repositories can be registered in multiple nodes. So it's not a case of you have to choose which node. You could be in multiple nodes if you make sense to be visible in more than one node. So this is just to check if you were still listening. I will, at the end of every module, just flash up the flashcards. So these are the flashcards which are going to be on the website from tomorrow. And you should be able to answer these two questions. But this is to check if you've been paying attention. Module 2. So the expected outcomes of the EOS Federation, I think this is very important to, from what we've seen about who the handbook was for and why we want to build the Federation, it's important to overlap with the outcomes from the EOSC Federation. So these are the main expected outcomes which are described in more detail in the handbook on pages 12 and 13. And the idea is you can see the strong correlation between what I've already said about the vision statement is to provide access to digital resources, improve research reproducibility, increase collaboration and knowledge sharing, improve efficiency and the impact of the investment in research. So by higher data reuse, we actually increase the investment. And of course, if we want to share data across domains, we need more standardization, also within certain domains which are not so advanced, and also improving the robustness and the data sovereignty. Data sovereignty in this sense applies where's the data kept for the long term and what licenses, under what licenses it's made available. So in our case, what we did is we can match all of these things. You can look at, you have these slides online soon, but we match all of these 7 expected outcomes with what we already are trying to do. And we feel that there's a strong one-to-one mapping between a lot of our work and we know is necessary and what the EOS Federation is expected to produce. And we even we were lucky enough to get funding as a community in 2018 to 2022, and we also did some metrics. We could monitor how much was actually being adopted, and a lot of these things are very pragmatic, practical outcomes which have now become standard tools inside our community. It could have happened without EOSC funding, but at a much, let's say, would have been more difficult, would have taken longer time, and wouldn't have been as done in such a coherent fashion. So flashcards for this one is listed at least three of the expected outcomes. This maybe you would need to go back to the handbook or think about it. And then there's a trick question because question number 2 is who represents a multi-partner node? I mentioned it in the first module. You need one legal representative to represent the multi-partners. But we'll also be talking about that now as we go into the governance of the EOS Federation. So governance is, of course, is a big word, but it's a very important aspect, especially when we're talking across institutes, across legal entities, across countries, and also right across Europe. So we can divide the governance of the EOS Federation into 2 parts, I would say. There's what I call the high-level tripartite governance, which is made up of representatives of the European Commission, mainly from DG RTD and DG Connect. Then there's the steering board, which is representing the member states. So every member state has a board member in there, in the steering board. And then there's the EOSC Association, who represents the community. The EOSC Association is an AISBL non-profit organization, which is also a partnership with the European Commission, which means they work closely with the Commission and they get partially funded by the Commission. But the funding also comes from the community. So there's over 200 members, as far as I know, and they pay a fee to be a member, an annual fee. Then we have the actual execution of the Federation. What is happening, let's say, on a weekly or monthly basis, that's what I call the EOS Federation governance. And they made up of the Memorandum of Understanding, which is now evolving into what's called a framework agreement, but more about that later. We have the Node Coordinators Committee, where all node coordinators are present, and where it's actually the main decisions are made about the Federation, about, let's say, the governance of the Federation. The Node Operations Committee, which is made up of representatives of the nodes about defining what is operations, and finally the working groups. So it gets quite complicated when you look at this diagram. There's some text on this, but I think to simplify things, think of it as there's this high-level tripartite, and then the people who have signed the MOU. So everyone signed the MOU who was in the first wave, and in the second wave, they still have to do that. So one of the prerequisites of being on the Node Coordinators Committee is you have to be a signatory of the MOU. So we propose members to all of these bodies here, and then we work together. It does mean that if you're building a node, you need people who can spend time in meetings. Again, I show the example of the Panos governance. So what we did is we designated ESRF as the legal representative who signed the legally, after we got legal permission from all the partners, we could sign the legally non-binding MOU with the association. We then are busy developing. So if you look here, we're developing a consortium agreement for the future operation and interaction of the node with the federation. So the Panos node doesn't exist as a legal entity. There's a legal representative for it, and we will have, so this is not signed yet by all the partners because we still are working on this, but we will have an agreement binding us together in this project, in this activity. So we know each other since many years, but this is a new endeavor. So we need a new document which will decide how the different partners work together and what the legal representative can do on behalf of the partners without having to consult all the lawyers again. So, and on the left, you see the memorandum of understanding, which has to be signed. If we go a little bit into the operation, so this is also a very important aspect which people might not all be aware of, but the EOS Federation is not in operation yet. So when we talk about the federation, we mean a multi-node organization. Today, there's only one official node, and that is the EU node, which is financed by the European Commission. And one node does not make a federation. So we have one node officially in operation, and the first wave nodes are planned to come into operation in October. So October fits well with the symposium date, but we are currently still not, I think half of the first wave nodes have been officially accepted into the AAI infrastructure, but not everyone is in there yet, and this will take time. Once we have everyone officially in operation, then the federation will be officially operating. And operation means we'll need to include new requirements about monitoring and what does it actually mean? What is the daily status that has to be reported or monthly or whatever? This is all being decided inside the node's operations committee. Another thing you have to do, it's also on pages 21 to 22, is every node has to provide 5 roles. So nominate people in these 5 roles. And these 5 roles are important because they're the minimum roles that you have to fulfill, that you have to provide people in. And then you can also provide people who'll be working on these different working groups. So it's not the only 2 committees where you have to provide someone is on the Node Operations Committee and the Coordinators Committee, but you don't. The other working groups are on a voluntary basis. Of course, it's very useful to be there, especially for the mandatory ones, mandatory capabilities like the federated IAAI, but there's no obligation to be there always. Then 2 of them are crossed out because they're still not, at the moment, they're not populated yet. So they will come up at a later stage. And new working groups can, of course, be proposed. All we need is a mandate, a chair and a co-chair, and at least 5 nodes that are willing to work on this. Just to give you an idea how much time this takes. So one of the things that like in my case, I spend maybe at least a quarter of my time working as a coordinator and coordinating the node. Our operations manager is also doing the same. Then cybersecurity is, of course, strongly overlapping with the whole general cybersecurity issues. So we don't have We have people who it's hard to distinguish between what's specific to the federation and what is not, but there we have some effort. The people who are hardest to get access to are the legal people. They are very busy, and so we only have a very small percentage. The 2% is not, there's a very large, maybe it's an upper limit. Communications, we do have some more help from there as well. But I'd say, think of these roles when you are, people really have to be able to make the time available when they want to start working on this. And ideally, you would have more time than this. What's not mentioned in the roles that you have to fulfill is building and maintaining the services you're going to provide as part of the node. And so in our case, we provide primarily data and also services around data. And there we have in all the 11 facilities, I would say at least 20 people working. But that is not considered part of the federation in that sense. But the federation wouldn't be useful without these services. But just to show you, there is a lot of in-kind that is happening to make a node. So if you were listening, you might be able to answer these already. The elements of what is the EOS Federation. So the two main groups around the EOS Federation governance, and what are the 5 roles? You might even know that by heart by now. Module 4 is about the architecture. So the architecture is really sort of, we could say, the core of the federation, and where a lot of people would be expecting many more technical details in there as well. We've kept it inside the handbook. We've kept it at a very high level, but it still is something which is defining how this is going to work together. So the goal is to get to this kind of, let's say, in October, this is what should be happening on a daily basis, if you like. There will be all these nodes, thematic nodes, national nodes, and infra nodes, or what we call European nodes. They will be communicating with the EU node and also with each other via what are called they implement federating capabilities, and there are interfaces which are defined, which allow them to communicate between each other. This is what we're trying to get to, and what should has been committed as it's a commitment to have this by October for hopefully the 13 first wave nodes plus the EU node. What is important, so this is a very schematic diagram. What is important in this diagram, I think, is important to realize also when you're building a node is you don't give up ownership or, well, responsibility, but ownership or control over your own resources. It's really a question of sharing them according to a standard, according to common rules. But if you look at this diagram, I think for me, one of the most interesting aspects is this yellow dotted area here, is if you take a node, and I take the case of our 11 partners in the Panos node, we have lots of stuff we're not going to put in the federation. We have a lot of, let's say, resources which we will keep and for our what we call users directly and will not be managed by the rules of the federation. But then there will be certain things where we see the added value of sharing them, and these will be following the rules that and also implementing the interfaces that the federation is defining. So when you're coming up with your concept of a node, you have to make this distinction. What are the most useful things I want to share, but I still have to maintain myself and keep control of? And what is the effort required what do I have to comply with so that we can share these things? There are different ways. You see some of them are, we talk about pushing and pulling. So in the case of when you advertise resources in the what's called the resource hub of the EU node, the EU node comes and regularly updates through an API what resources are available and what has changed. Other things, for instance, monitoring and that, we will have a push model where each node will provide information to a central place or even just keep it for themselves and share it if anyone wants to come and look at it. So what's called the interoperability framework, yeah, this word is unfortunately heavily overused in many different contexts as well. So it's hard, always everyone couldn't understand something different. But in this framework of the EU node and the EOSC Federation, it is defining the APIs or the interfaces which are a requirement for the nodes to implement. So it doesn't refer to interoperability about data and all these many other options about interoperability. It's really quite a restricted meaning and also quite easy to understand. Yeah. I just thought, I'm my own background is a software engineer, and I built some large control systems and different systems like that. And when you talk about architecture, often you start off with these what we call these bubbles and lines between these bubbles, if you like. This is really at the level at which the handbook is describing the architecture of the EOSC Federation. So we're not going, and you'll see an example later on where there's much more detail. The real detail is for documents that are referenced by the handbook. But I think, and this is my own experience developing architectures, it's important to have this high-level view, the big picture of what is talking to what and what has to provide what to what. And then you can go into the details. So there's a lot of terminology in there, and most of these terms, I think all of them are defined in the glossary at the end. So you have to get your mind around what these different terminologies mean. One could say why we have new terms. I think we need terms, and seen as this is a different, something relatively new or different to what exists elsewhere, we invented, or the words, it's not myself, but this is the community has developed a specific terminology for this. I hope all of these terms, I'm convinced all of these terms are described or defined in the glossary. And if they aren't, we will add them. So we start off with what's called the core capabilities. So you have to understand a capability as some kind of service or some kind of activity that you implement and provide. So some of these will be very technical. If you go into the AAI, it's very technical from a technical point of view. There's a lot of technology, let's say, a lot of handshaking that goes on between different protocols. Others could be like help desk, which is more, it's not actually the idea is to ask people have a way of escalating and sharing help desk issues. It's not actually choosing a single implementation or saying you have to use this. There might not even be an API. It could be something at a very low tech level of an email follow-up. But that this is agreed between all the nodes. I think some people would say, well, why call them all capabilities? They were, after long discussion, we decided these would all be capabilities, but they have different, let's say, ways of being implemented or described. Yeah. So even if you look at the user space, it's a capability, but it's the way you interact with the user when the user comes to the node. So it could be a website, it could be a collection of websites, a workflow, different things. Yeah. We have the capabilities are defined between what's called mandatory and recommended. So the mandatory ones are the ones that have to be implemented to be considered a node or to be part of the EOS Federation. And to date, they are, let's see, I think they come in the next one, but there were 2 mandatory capabilities, and now there's another 2 that will be decided this year, but I will mention them in a future slide. We would also encourage nodes to provide federating capabilities. So there are capabilities which are not even defined today, exchanging metadata between different data repositories. This is something that will come up and could be implemented by any of the nodes that want to share this kind of information. Then we also have what are called generic capabilities. So the Generic capabilities are ones that are like a service that are offered by the node, and some that are considered very common are data management, interactive notebooks. So think of Jupyter notebooks, but there could be other kinds of notebooks, computing, storage, and also file sharing as well. So these are, again, not mandatory capabilities, but are services that nodes are going to offer or are offering. And so it's good to have a general, let's say, to group these together in a single category. So we did in the second version of the handbook, we decided to also have a standard numbering of the federating capabilities. So you see this FC stands for federating capabilities. It's not very inventive or innovative. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. Today, 1 and 2 were the ones that were mandatory. And then these other 3, help desk, service monitoring, and service management, will become mandatory this year. At the moment, they are still under discussion by the EOSC Node Operations Committee, but they are supposed to be coming up with recommendations before October so that we can implement them. Then there will be others which will be in the future. So service accounting, order management is how do people actually get access to resources which are cost intensive or have a cost involved. How do you deploy applications? And one thing that was also decided was not to constrain everyone to use the same technology or to be imposing on that. So what the EOS Federation has to do is to come up with ways of, let's say, defining the minimum common denominator between these different federating capabilities and leaving people freedom, or the nodes of freedom, to implement them with different implementations. One thing that's not a choice is that you have to implement the AAI and you have to support EduGain as well. So this is, EduGain is widely used. I think most universities support it in Europe. And on top of this has been added an identity layer called My Access ID, and the different services connect to this. So what you do is you then, if you connect to the My Access ID, you can see, yeah, we have different services underneath or different communities. So Euro HPC, EOSC Federation, S3, these are different communities who will use the My Access ID identity layer to accept EduGain identities. So the big thing about that is, I don't know if I I mean, the goal of this, and sometimes it sounds a bit, for people who are not into AAI, it sounds a bit esoteric, but the goal of this is that users will log in once and then move around the federation without having to re-authenticate. So you could log into the node of your choice, or you could have like a node where you go normally, and then using single sign-on, you could navigate to another node or to the EU node, and you wouldn't have to log in again. This is something which is of value for users, but also for people managing identities. So we've had this, yes, with the service monitoring. So every node has to have nominated the operations manager, and this is where we discuss how operations are actually going to happen, what is the minimum, and so on. What has been selected as the way of managing services is something called FitSM. This is a standard which looks very complicated, but it will be a lighter version of this which will be adopted. But just so that you know, FitSM is really, every operations manager must have followed, I think it's a half-day course on FitSM. Then the help desk, which is becoming mandatory this year, will be something that is that we can escalate help desk issues between nodes. So not actually choosing or even having an API which would exchange things machine to machine. This will probably be human to human. What seems to be quite common is there's this tool called Zamad, which has been used by the EU node, also by the German node, as far as I know. And in our case, we're also planning to set up Zamad for our node as well, because seeing as we a new node and the partners didn't have a common help desk system, we still have to set that up. We have our own AAI proxy. So this is again showing how we applied the requirements from the handbook in terms of PANOSC. And we're switching actually the umbrella ID to my access ID this month. So we'll be the seventh the seventh node of the first wave that is then connected to my access ID. We have our own resource catalog, which is called TESHub. This was co-developed with Elixir. We haven't defined what we're doing in terms of service monitoring at a node level. So we still have to do that. And we followed the service training, the FitSM training. Just to show you, how we did the AAI. So we were fortunate in the sense is that we had something called the photon and neutron cluster AAI called Umbrella. And now Umbrella has been hooked up to my access ID so that people will not have to create accounts anymore. They use their facility accounts. So in that sense, for us, it was we'd already done a lot of work preparing how to manage that. But if you don't have your own proxy already for managing identities in your community or the node, this is something you still have to set up. So this could be something which would require specialist knowledge. Then just to show you, you can have very simple architecture schema. So in our case, we have the IDP, which is the identity proxy. We talk to the EU node. We have our home page. And behind that, everything is managed by the resource catalog, which is also implemented by TESHub. Then we have multiple nodes provide data repositories. And our remote services could be for doing data analysis, for doing number crunching, for doing different things. And this is, if you remember the picture I showed you about Wikipedia, this is really the high-level picture, which gives me a view of everything that we are providing. Once you get into each of these lines or each of these blocks, things, of course, become much more complex. I took the liberty of taking the EUDAT example and using an AI-generated diagram. So there might be one or two mistakes in this still. But you can see that if you look at EUDAT, for instance, which is the European Data Sharing Platform, again, they have different categories of services, repositories, shrink and share. They offer a VRE via Galaxy, which is a scientific workflow system. They offer storage. They federate all this, and then this is talking then to the other nodes. So it can be still kept at a very understandable, simple to understand level. Things can get, however, much more complicated. I show this picture not to scare you, but to show you the real picture of how the EU node was designed and what is the architecture of the EU node. So the EU node is something which didn't exist beforehand, was then commissioned by the European Commission, and they built this whole infrastructure with a number of subcontractors, and you end up with a much more complex picture, if you like, because they were of course, going to offer the first node, and so they wanted to be exemplary in their setup. But I think, this is something you could use as inspiration. Everything is, this document describes everything online, so you can go and have a look at it. But you could also take away a picture which is simpler than that, but you'll end up also maybe doing something which is easier for you to implement as well. But I think even if this looks much more complex, in the end, we are identifying which services are being shared with whom. And the goal, of course, is to do as much as we can that we offer services to researchers. So one of the requirements or exercises for the first wave was to identify use cases. So there were a number of use cases that was identified. Some of them, or all of them, involve more than one node. And the idea was to show how we can actually communicate between these different nodes. So again, there's some very nice videos that are coming out on the EOSC website, and you can see what was actually done there, and what is gives you a flavor of what is going to be possible afterwards. These are the use cases. Two critical topics which cannot be ignored are GDPR compliance, of course, and cybersecurity. So a lot of work is going on there. And this is also, it's the same as if you set up a website and you want to open it to the rest of the world, you have to consider these two factors as well. So this is not a surprise at all, but it's something which you can't neglect, and imposes certain policies as well, which you will have to accept or consider. We've worked on this as well. We actually, because of a cyber attack in our community, one of the nodes and one of the partners had a cyber attack which took them down for a long time. There's been a lot of awareness around cybersecurity inside the Panos community. So these are the three flashcards. I'll let you look at them and see if you can answer them. So I think that's enough of a break. Now we go to module 5, the research resources. So for a thematic node, these are the most important things. The other federating part are important to be part of the club, but what we're actually offering to researchers are research resources. And if you look at the policy, the first topic, the first point on the European Research Area Policy Agenda is enabling open science via sharing and reuse of data, including through the European Open Science Cloud. So I think it shows the importance of having the research resources. And if you look at all of the presentations around EOSC, we always talk about we're setting up the web of fair data. So this is still a major topic which has to still be, I think, addressed with more effort once we have the federated part working. This is the agenda, the plan for the era. And so you can see this is all aligned inside the Commission's mind. The Federation becomes operational this year. We get the second wave of nodes. The partnership will be rediscussed in 2027, and there will be a new model for financing as well. We've also, similar to with the federating capabilities, we've also defined a lot of research, let's say the categories of research resources, which we think are the most common ones and the most important ones. So there are 10 of them. And I won't go, I think there's nothing really, I mean, they're obvious in what they are supposed to present. What is not obvious today, and this is something which, as I said, still needs more work, is how will we, how will the Federation enhance the exchange of these resources between nodes as well? One thing is presenting them through a node, but the other thing is, can the Federation, or how will the Federation boost the availability and the reuse or the accessibility to these resources? But I think already bringing them together across so many different nodes and so many different communities is going to be already will help the lives of researchers. They will find places in a single place more easily. So in the case of our node, as you see, we had 11 partners. The Panos node, how we've done this is nothing very complicated. We've taken the resources that are the ones that are public and made them available through a single homepage. So we have eos.panos.eu. Most of what we offer, and this is because mostly what we do is produce data, is we offer data repositories. So if you offer data, your node could be a collection of these data repositories as well. We also have a very good virtual remote environment called Visa, which has quite an advanced approach to how to provide remote analysis to researchers. And you can see the list of the different services that we have, but you can go and look at this yourself. Yeah? We also have a video, which I won't go through now, but this shows the concept of what we're trying to achieve and the user experience that we're going to have. And I would suggest, I mean, it was a very useful exercise we did for the symposium last year. I'd suggest everyone does this exercise at least on paper for their own node as well, because it gives you an idea of where are you going, what are you trying to offer to your community. The flash and the cards, yeah, we have, oh, I had a numbering mistake there, but you need to think about what are the research resources you're going to provide and how they're going to be used by the overall by the federation or by the research community. So we come to the last module 6. So this is the last, this was, I think, chapter 6 as well, if I'm not mistaken, where we're applying to become, how would you apply to become a node? So you need to set up, there's this checklist of things that you need to do. So if I go back to the beginning of the talk, I think really the most important thing is to have a good motivation. Otherwise, seen as all of the work we're doing at the moment is in kind, it becomes very difficult to stay motivated if you don't have a good motivation. You'll need a legal entity because of the legal aspects. Even just for AAI, you need a legal entity that can sign policy agreements with Géant and also will be able to speak on behalf of your community. The project charter, so I think some of you are grantees in EOS Gravity, so you will be working on the project charter and preparing this, and the other courses coming up on this. You need to designate or nominate the 5 persons or the 5 roles. Sustainability has been said it should be between 2, maybe ideally 5 years. I would say 5 years is better because there's a lot of work. I mean, we already in this process since almost 2 years, and so it's a good thing that we were planning on going for the long haul and not just for the 2 years. Service monitoring and management will be a requirement quite soon. And also, you don't have to, but it's always good to be able to also accept. I mean, what we've seen is through various projects like Oscars, but also just various projects, people will want to say, the node exists, I want to be visible there, can you onboard me? And then there's the different rules which are brought up by the EOS Federation, either from the EOS tripartite or from the EOS Federation governance. So we've worked on all these things. I think I've explained them quite well. We also had, as I said, we had this example at the Paul Scherrer Institute in Switzerland. These are 2 services which existed already, and they were provided as or requested to be onboarded as well, so that they are part of the catalog of people who are looking for resources from this community or in this community. For the moment, we have 3 official guidelines. So the details, these are documents of sometimes 40 pages themselves. And these are, but that's the first one. The second and third one are much shorter. And if you would, I would say the second and third are what are actually the interoperability framework, the current interoperability framework. So you can refer to these, you must refer to these, and there will be more coming online this year. These are major changes which are foreseen. So there's the framework agreement. So this is a discussion that, well, it's a work that has happened already, and now there's a final draft which is under agreement. It's similar to the Memorandum of Understanding, but it's legally binding. From our understanding, and also this was requested at the EOSC Association meeting last week, was that the 2 versions, let's say the 2 documents should coexist, at least for the foreseeable future, so that you are, the MOU will be the minimum requirement that will have to be signed, but you don't have to sign the legally binding version as well, at least not for the, it's a short term or for the foreseeable future. There's a new document out from the EU node. What does it mean? Which policies you have to agree to be onboarded as an official node? And then the new mandatory federating capabilities. So you can see that, you know, version 3 will have to include all of these things as well. But I wanted to give you a feeling for what's there already. So these are the flashcards for module 6. Easy peasy, I think. First, and some acknowledgements, really. Thank you to everyone who was involved with, I hope I've included all the people who were active there over the two, version 1, version 2. We were a number of editors as well. I was not alone. We had Rudolph, Bob, Miguel, Mark. We had a lot of feedback from the tripartite group and also the people who filled in the survey. So some of you, I thank you for your input. And also the Academy. I think it's a great idea to have this academy, and we've been helped by these people. Isabel, Eleni are the two main people, but Zoltan you heard previously, Miguel who will help with the online training, and Jan who's organized this meeting, and Claudia who does all of our work on the website.